Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. We will get going here on our webinar. First thing we're going to do is we're just going to introduce ourselves and the speakers for today. Hope everyone can see us. You should have 2 video windows of myself and Mike Kelland, and you should also see a PowerPoint slide deck, which currently has YoppWorks Reactive ATI. Okay, I think we're live and I think we're working, so here we go. Okay, good afternoon, good morning everyone. Just formally introduce ourselves. So I'll start off. My name is Jack Gulas. I'm the CEO of YoppWorks. I'll introduce YoppWorks a little more formally here in the next couple of slides. A little bit of background on myself. Serial entrepreneur. I've done many companies. Very excited about YoppWorks. It's my 7th company, and YoppWorks is a exclusive open source consulting and training partner. And I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. I have the privilege today of being joined by Mike Kelland, who's the VP of Services at Lightbend. Mike has got extensive experience in software design and architecture. He was formerly the CEO of Bold Radius Solutions, another Lightbend partner that got acquired about 1.5 years ago. And I've invited Mike to join us today to provide his perspective from Lightbend on what they're seeing in the market and how the Reactive ATI offering will align and hopefully augment some of the efforts that Lightbend is making in the market. So welcome again, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jack.
So a little bit more on the company, on YoppWorks and our business model, how we partner with Lightbend, and I think what makes the 2 companies really a great partnership. So I'll talk a bit about that, but before I do, for those of you who don't know Lightbend, I'm going to ask Mike to provide just a little bit of background on Lightbend and some of their key solutions that are important to understand before we go through today's presentation. So Mike, maybe just a few minutes on Lightbend and some of your core solutions as described in the slide here.
Sure, yeah, happy to give that. So Lightbend is the company behind Akka, Scala, and the Play framework, as well as a strong contributor to other open source technologies like Spark. We are the originator of sort of this term reactive through the Reactive Manifesto that we'll talk about a little bit later. And the core goal of Lightbend is to ensure that organizations can adopt the reactive platform, which is essentially our software product based on the open source. We provide deployment best practices, our enterprise suite, which is commercial software around the product. Production support, things like health checks and things like that. And our core mission is to help companies to really get into modern software development practices. So be able to adopt technologies that allow them to scale, to use data in real-time context and massive amounts of data in real-time context, and build applications that support the kinds of capabilities that users and customers expect from organizations.
Thanks, Mike. So a little bit on YoppWorks and why we complement, and we're so excited about the partnership with Lightbend. So as Mike described, Lightbend provides the technology, the products, but also the guidance on reactive and the reactive architectures, which is really a paradigm shift in the market on how to design and deploy applications, modern day applications. So for us, we're exclusively partnered with Lightbend for any kind of application development or application development framework. And as a consulting and training organization, what we like to offer are services that help customers to adopt the technology, the reactive architecture that Mike talked about, and to drive the value within the organization as quickly as possible for customers that are looking to use these products in this architecture. So for today, we're going to talk about one example with Reactive ATI and actually how we do that. And to do so, I think it's important to just provide a little bit of a background on our experiences. So for the last 12 to 18 months, since we really partnered with Lightbend, we've had lots of conversations with customers around the adoption model and the timeline by which they would adopt the technology. And what we find is that there's often someone within the enterprise that's really excited about reactive and microservices architectures and is looking to sponsor that particular initiative within the organization. And there's always some legacy, either systems or designs that are in place within the enterprise. And so before the technology discussions are made on how to actually deploy and or where the reactive architecture is best applied, we see customers go through this kind of three-step process where they really need to understand how first they would design it, what systems to target, what applications to target, even what parts of the business. And there's so many options out there, from technologies in the open source communities and tools to use. The next natural phase is that once you've decided what architecture or what systems or applications to target, to actually build it, and how to build it so that there's a low-hanging fruit or short-term wins that you can demonstrate some clear ROI as an organization is making a bet on reactive, to demonstrate back to the stakeholders that there is value in doing this. And finally, once it's deployed and it's running, it's got to be effectively running. And when it's effectively running, this type of win will drive additional adoption in the organization. So we've had numerous customer conversations or experience with customer engagements, and we found that customers are at different points in the maturity or the journey to adopt reactive as an architecture. And so lots of the conversations tend to be, well, just start and deploy and get on with it. Whereas we've recognized that organizations, enterprise need more time to think about, where best to apply this. So this is really the background and the genesis for Reactive ATI. And specifically where we're focusing is really on that kind of designed and early elements of the build phase, but really to give customers a handheld experience where they can then determine where are the best places to deploy this technology. So it's meant to be a very consultative approach, using kind of a trusted advisor model from an organization that has lots of experience doing this. So maybe Mike, you could actually just share your experiences on why a design, build, and run type of life cycle or journey, where you would see similar examples and or how you think Reactive ATI, from particularly on the design side, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we're going to go through this, we're going to talk a lot about reactive, and so if you're just joining the reactive bandwagon at this point, we'll get into what that is and everything like that. But in evaluating any new technology and trying to create new business capabilities based on that technology, it's really important to have a starting point. And we see across hundreds and hundreds of customers that we've worked with who have deployed incredible, business-changing applications based on the reactive platform, that it generally goes this way. We start with a design phase, we move through to build, and we run the thing. In order to get into that, having a really good roadmap and a really good understanding of what it is that you're trying to accomplish and how those technologies are going to support that accomplishment is critical. And that's exactly what the Reactive ATI is going to do as we go through. So we're really excited about partnering up with YoppWorks to get this out there and how it's going to enable Lightbend customers to understand how they can kickstart their projects and build themselves a roadmap for success.
Great, thanks, Mike. So just a little more details on if you're if you're identifying with any of these bullets here on, you've tried to initiate microservice architecture or reactive architecture within your enterprise. In some cases, where do I start? How do I get, maybe I'm a technical lead, I'm a development manager, I'm in IT, and I'm trying to convince the business that creating or continuing with monolithic type of legacy architectures is not the way for us to move forward. But how do I get the stakeholders on board? How do I determine the business value for moving to this type of architecture? Are we doing it right? Are we biting off too much to start off? Are we trying to boil the ocean? Do we have the capacity internally and the skill set and the talent? How do we evolve our talent and our team members to be able to continue to drive a reactive architecture? And then finally, even within the Lightbend stack, there are many tools, many different products to use. What are the best ones to start with, that'll show that early success and those early wins by adopting the reactive architecture? So if you identify with any of these points, you're exactly the type of organization and customer that we've been talking to over the last 12 to 18 months that we're hoping to provide a solution that makes this a lot easier for you. So specifically, what is Reactive ATI? And we'll get into a lot more detail here throughout the webinar. But Reactive ATI is it's a productized service offering that really has three phases. It has an assessment, it has a training component, and then it has an implementation component. It is a repeatable methodology that we've developed, one that's meant to be very concise, provides some very specific deliverables for the customers throughout the three phases that we are rolling out, and is also meant to be a very short-term engagement that provides customers that direction and the type of information they're looking for to further make a decision on whether or not they want to continue down the reactive architecture. I would also say that it's not just for customers who are thinking about deploying reactive, but that have tried to do it in the past and maybe have not achieved or realized the type of benefits that they thought they were going to get. So, beyond the Reactive ATI brand or marketing, there is definitely much more details to the methodology that we're going to go on or describe here in the presentation. So to get to the first one in terms of the assessment. So the assessment is the first phase. It's a combination of, first of all, it's an on-site engagement where we would send a senior member of the YoppWorks team to your location, coordinating with the sponsor of the Reactive ATI engagement. It'd be up to a week in terms of a duration where we would spend time sponsored by the contact that we have in the organization to meet with various stakeholders. And this is one where we would definitely want to talk to the development team so we can better understand your current development process. We want to understand how you do release of your software today, the architecture, the toolings that you're using, but also exposure to the business stakeholders to understand for them what are the key drivers for their business in terms of, is it time to market? Is it cost savings? Is it getting that kind of agility and flexibility into the business? But also a key component of this is that we use the Lightbend maturity model, excuse me, which is really a checklist that goes through a series of questions to understand more specifically, if I can use the terminology, quantitative review of the maturity of your organization. And then the other elements that I talked about are more qualitative that we combine. So Mike, maybe you can describe a little more the maturity model from Lightbend and how YoppWorks would use this in the assessment phase.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at adoption of any new technology, right? So any new business changing technology, you're going to go through a digital transformation process. That's going to happen. If you look at certain organizations, and you can think of them as the ones that you might think of as sort of digital natives, these are companies and organizations that have digital transformation as part of their DNA. They've built it in. So everything that they do, they're starting with this idea that they have to continually disrupt themselves, right? And these companies like Google and Twitter and LinkedIn, like these kinds of companies that if somebody comes up with a new idea and a new way of doing things, they very rapidly implement it and they get it out the door. This is where the world's moving, and we hear this all the time from all kinds of companies. We're not a bank. We're a software company that does banking. We are no longer a coffee company. We are a software company that also sells coffee. We're moving to this world where everybody has to be a software first company, sort of Mark Andreessen's software is eating the world kind of thing. And in the maturity model, what we do with that is we set you up and we say, let's look at the difference between what you're doing today and what an organization that is sort of a digital native is doing, right? So what are the differences in terms of how you approach things? And a lot of these things are non-technical. They have to do with process and procedure and how quickly you're able to get new capabilities into production and even a little bit of culture, right? Like, how willing is the organization to look at new ideas, adopt new ideas, try things out, experiment and everything like that. And so with this checklist, we come up with a fairly targeted maturity model based on our experience with hundreds of customers using the Lightbend stack, because using Lightbend technology is usually a way that people go through these digital transformations. That it's a tool that is used for modernization and it's used for greenfield applications that are going to change the business, going from not just an incremental change, but, a change that, might reduce cost while also massively increasing revenue and bringing new product to market. And so the maturity model helps you to place yourself on that scale, right? And our scale goes from sort of what we call traditional business, right? So if I'm a company that really doesn't need to change in terms of software, and those are, as I say, very, very rare these days. But if I'm in that mode where software is not really part of what we do, then we'd be more sort of traditional business, and we just sort of operate and run. And then we go through three major phases in the middle that are really critical. We've got an aware stage, a expanding stage, and a standardizing stage, and then the digital native stage. And where you are in terms of your organization's maturity makes a big difference on how you should look at these technologies, how you should start to try to adopt these technologies, and what you should hope to achieve in terms of success out of these things, right? We don't want to have you come in and take an organization that is in sort of what we call the aware stage and try to immediately jump straight to digital native, because you're probably not going to succeed at that. It's a bridge too far. And so what we'd rather do is with this ATI process in the assessment stage, understand what are the key levers you need to pull to bring yourself up a level, to adopt this technology, adopt these capabilities. That's going to be not only highly meaningful in terms of business result, but it's also going to be highly successful in the environment that you're currently in. And that's the foundation of the maturity model. It's a tool, and it gives you that assessment point to start from, and a jumping off point to start from.
Thanks, Mike. So just to continue on the assessment phase, what will be critical as part of this is the workshop format. So as Mike described, the maturity model, this is an important tool that we use in this phase of the Reactive ATI engagement. But through the workshops, we were asking additional questions beyond maturity model to really understand, again, the business value, and to take the maturity model and add to it some additional, and for folks on the webinar here that are new to what is reactive, as we mentioned in an earlier slide, the Reactive Manifesto, which is a document that's readily available. I think you're now up to tens of thousands of signatures on that, Mike.
Yeah, 20,000, over 20,000.
Over 20,000 people have committed to that type of architecture framework. But pulling from that, the maturity model, and also our experiences with other customers in this workshop format, this slide here just describes at a more detailed level the types of questions and what we would look at, and specifically around value, business value, but also responsiveness. And if you read the Reactive Manifesto and you really understand what is the primary tenet of a reactive architecture, it's how responsive is that architecture. So with that, we look at, in terms of form, the elastic aspects, and for it to be resilient. This is, again, in a workshop, we would start to pinpoint either legacy applications that are more monolithic in architecture that you want to modernize, and or greenfield that you want to deploy towards. And so that we could really understand then what are the elastic and resilient components of it, so that we can then also be message driven in the means by which we would design it. So the workshop format, as I said, for the assessment up to a week, would be very dynamic in nature, both using some more quantitative kind of answers and questions and data, and then also more the qualitative as we're trying to understand how best to adopt this within your enterprise. Mike, anything else you want to add here, just kind of from a Reactive Manifesto or just the assessment phase?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like this approach, and I think YoppWorks, you guys have done a really, really good job of thinking through how this works. The business value is obviously how you're going to drive the project, and understanding how that business value actually gets accomplished, and assessing how that can be put together with a modernization strategy or a new business capability strategy is going to be critical to that assessment and selling the project up and evaluating how to use this thing. The four tenets of the Reactive Manifesto, as you have here, responsive, elastic, resilient, and message driven, flow really well in how this is described. And so in order to achieve the capability, the business value that you're looking to achieve with the software that you're creating, you need it to be responsive. And what responsiveness means is it means that no matter what, it's going to respond to a user or a client. The user is not going to show up and be like, oh, the system's down, right? And we've seen this all over the place. If you've ever sort of taken a flight on a bad day and the airline systems go down, right? And suddenly like the whole fleet's grounded, right? Well, responsiveness means that doesn't happen. The system is constantly responsive. And in order to be responsive, you need to be elastic and resilient, right? We need to make sure that these systems not only can scale up and scale down so that they're responsive under load, but they've also got high resiliency, so that if there's a loss or a failure in any component of the system, we maintain that responsiveness and continue to deliver that business value. And the only real way to achieve elastic and resilient systems is through a message-driven architecture. And that's where the Lightbend ATI reactive platform comes in. But if we don't have a well-designed message-driven architecture in the background, we can't hope to achieve true elasticity or true resiliency. And therefore, we lose our responsiveness, and suddenly we're dropping our business value. So this model works really, really well. It mirrors the reactive manifesto that Lightbend pioneered that has, as we said, 20,000, more than 20,000 signatures of luminaries across the industry signed up to building modern systems in this way. And I think that the approach makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Mike. So now moving to the next phase of Reactive ATI, which is training. So after a week of engagement, up to a week of engagement on site with your team, and going through the assessment and asking all those questions and doing workshops, what I think would start happening, or what we saw happening, is that we started seeing some excitement and people wanting to, okay, I'm understanding why you're asking me these questions. I really like the idea of reactive. You guys are YoppWorks are giving me a lot of ideas on where I can apply this. But what if I want to know a little bit more? If I want to go a little deeper, and exactly, and maybe just not so much theoretical, but is there a way for me to get a little more practical, to get myself into a bit of a sandbox or trying this out? And so the same technical lead from YoppWorks would be on site for a week, would then work with you the following week, who's certified as YoppWorks was a co-developer of the reactive architecture course that was recently launched by Lightbend. But what we would do next as part of the Reactive ATI is then to do an on-site training engagement with most likely the sponsor that we worked with to get the engagement going, and then some other stakeholders who were demonstrating some interest to understand more about the reactive architecture. And what's really cool about this course, and why it aligns really well to our Reactive ATI offering, is it's not just a pure technical course on reactive. It's a very holistic approach that gives folks a good understanding, both practical and theoretical, of the merits of reactive. So specifically, there's a part of the approach is that the students would design a reactive application with the trainer, would analyze a sample domain, and then would compare that to how you would traditionally build monoliths. And again, the benefit of the course, and lots of work went into this, is to be able to demonstrate not just the technical elements of the technologies, but also the overall benefits of the architecture at a business level as well. So Mike, I know you guys were really pumped on this. We highlighted at Reactive Summit in Austin a few weeks ago. YoppWorks is really proud to have been part of the process here to bring this thing to market, and fits really well within our Reactive ATI offering. But maybe you can give a little more of the Lightbend perspective on why you guys are excited about this course.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the most exciting sort of things, I think, I shouldn't say that. We come up with all kinds of exciting technology all the time. It's one of the most exciting things that my group has come up with in a long time in partnership with YoppWorks. And it is so exciting to come up with a course that I think plugs a real hole in the industry, right? When you're moving to reactive systems, when you're moving to reactive architectures, and you want to take advantage of some of those advantages in the reactive manifesto that we just spoke about, you really have to think differently about how you design your applications. Java EE development is really based around this sort of very classic, I take some data from the web and I put it into a database, and then I do something with it and I pop it back out again. And that's not our world anymore, right? We're sort of clinging to that a little bit in certain areas, and a lot of enterprise systems are still living there. But if you look at the systems we use today and that are taking over our lives, those systems are all based on totally different models, right? I've got streams of data coming in from all over the place, and I have to sort of make decisions on that data and crunch it up in a way that makes sense, and then work interactively with the client, right? So this idea that I could sort of throw all the data into one big swamp, and then churn away at it on a nightly basis, and then come up with some insights, like, this is all old news. And where we're going to is streaming contextual use of data, microservice based environments that are highly flexible, agile, able to be changed. This will be the new modern software development practice, and we're seeing it already across both startups all picking it up en masse, but even in the global 5,000. In order to think that way, you have to look at how you design your applications very differently. And the reactive architecture course really is not a course that says, type these commands into a command line. They're much more, as Jack, you said, about concepts. And it's much more about, how do I think about this kind of system? How do I think about not blocking? How do I think about millions upon millions of users? Because that's our ambition for every one of these pieces of software, is to have millions and millions, maybe even billions of users addressing it at the same time. And that requirement to think that way doesn't just go down to the developers. It actually comes to, the leadership teams have to think that way about their applications. The operations teams need to think that way about their applications. Obviously, development does as well. But the course is built in such a way that the concepts are what we expose. And we take a team-based approach, an exercise-driven sort of approach that brings small teams within the course together to design reactive systems in a very hands-on, very interactive way, so that when you walk out of the course, you don't have to argue with your development, your operations team, for example, about how a reactive system should scale or how it should be deployed. And you don't have to, you can have a different conversation with your management team about the kinds of capabilities that you can easily bring to market using a reactive architecture. So I'm really excited about this course. We're getting massively rave reviews, and I'm sure that Jack, you guys are running these courses, and your people have been instrumental in putting this together. I'm sure you're seeing the same thing. It's incredible, and it is a starting point, and I love the fact that it's included in this ATI, because it is a starting point for teams to really embed these concepts into their heads so they can take full advantage of the power of a reactive system.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And one of the things that I think will make this even more powerful, more relevant, the reason we decided to do an assessment first and then the training, and to use the same technical lead for both, is that a lot of the information that we're collecting from the assessment will be very relevant for the concepts and the use cases that we'll be using for the reactive architecture course itself, right? So that even brings more relevance as we've spent up to a week with you and your team. The week prior we do the training, we bring all of that intel into how we actually, with the same person doing both the assessment and the training. And can really bring it to a level of where it resonates on that particular enterprise's dynamics, right, around how they're currently doing development, what are some of the challenges, and why are they considering this type of change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes perfect sense if you can take the learnings out of your assessment period immediately into a course like this. It's going to resonate really well with participants of the program.
Great. So now moving to the third and final phase of the Reactive ATI is implementation. And with implementation, what we're doing in this phase, which is up to a week's worth of effort, And this could be done, we're going to see how the customers or the enterprise would like to engage here, but this work could be done remote. So once that individual's done the up to the week on site of the assessment, 3 days of doing training with you, there will be people in our organization that will supplement that individual's efforts. But what we've done here is we're creating a very standard kind of look and feel report, where a lot of the information that we've collected from the assessment and even in the training phase will be applied to create a business case and a report for you that provides the roadmap and the guide by which you would be able to roll out a reactive architecture. There will be lots of elements considered in this. It's meant to be very much factual to the priorities of your business and what we uncovered in that assessment phase. But we are going to look to provide an overall business case, some ROI in terms of where the low-hanging fruit is, and then also how to maximize the benefits of using a Lightbend's reactive platform, which involves a bunch of different amazing technology components, and their guides and best practices on how to roll this out. And more specifically, the vision that we have for the report, we've been engaging with lots of technical leaders, development leaders, even CIOs that are saying, I hear a lot about the merits of reactive, but how do I put this in front of my board? How do I put this in front of my CEO? If we're going to make a bet, and where do I get the benefits? And maybe it's not today because we don't have the funding, but maybe it's 6 months from now, when we're getting either at the end of our fiscal year or at the start of a fiscal year. We're coming through a busy period, a cyclical part of our business, like the Christmas shopping period if you're in retail. But when I'm ready, or when there's an opportunity, I'd love to be able to present a report and a business case that supports the argument to trying reactive. And so what we have as a view on this and what we've developed is it's really an executive summary on why reactive, showing the real kind of world use cases for your organization, where we think ROI would come from, and also tailored to the objectives of the particular projects that we're talking about. And from this, we would also be able to provide some recommendations on where to start, how to start with your own internal capacity, and potentially, even supplement with some consulting services from YoppWorks to provide some architectural oversight or even some development efforts. And so this is meant to be, a very concise document that allows you to be able to present the merits, both technical and business, and to help you to, as a sponsor within your organization, to move, if it's even a little bit that that needle into more of a reactive architecture. So Mike, maybe you can comment on how from your customer engagements you think that this would be helpful. I've sat in front of a lot of executives that say to me, okay, where beyond the tech and beyond all the all the buzz, tell me how this helps my business. And I thought that the Verizon use case at Reactive Summit was a really good example and exactly the type of information here we're looking to provide these customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would say about this whole ATI thing, and the value, there's a bunch of value in here, right? And it's interesting because I would say that the value is actually not necessarily. It's not necessarily even in the Lightbend side of things. When you look at the ATI, and it's not even in the technology, like you said, Jack. I mean, what it's about is there's some really fundamental components to this methodology, including sort of learning how to build a modern architecture and that next revolution of software that we're going through right now. How do I take part in that, right? Which is the training and everything associated with that. How do I assess the maturity of my organization? What kind of business results could I drive from a project like this? And so, even if this is the first time you've ever heard of like reactive or even of Lightbend or even of Lightbend technologies or anything like that, this, you kind of owe it to yourself to take a deep look at this reactive ATI process, just so that you can come up with an assessment for whether or not this is going to fit into your environment. And in the process, what you're getting out of it is, learning. You're getting, an on-ramp to this new world. You're sort of plugging into the world of modern software development. And even if you decide to go in a different direction, or if something doesn't fit, having all of that is just going to give you the opportunity to make some really intelligent choices about how you modernize your infrastructure in the future, or what things you should evaluate, and all of that. So I really like this outline with our customers. I mean, you mentioned the Verizon use case. The Verizon use case for reactive is massive. It's an awesome example, and we're putting up the case study now. But these guys came back and they broke the model, is how I look at it, right? So if you think about the model of like e-commerce website conversions, right? If I want to increase the number of people who buy stuff off my website, that's just like one use case, but like generally speaking, right? I have, a cost to customer acquisition number, and I'm pouring dollars against that. And then I have a customer lifetime value, number off the back end. And I tweak those two metrics. I say, if I pour more money into my cost of customer acquisition, then my lifetime value should go up, or at least my number of customers against that lifetime value should go up. And so long as the lifetime value number is higher than the cost of customer acquisition value, then, we're making money. What these guys did is that they totally broke that model. They went in there, they built a reactive system that, is really responsive. It's really snappy under massive load. And these guys get, I think it was a quarter of the US population touches their website every year, which is just crazy. But like, they're getting this massive load. They're getting, suddenly getting all this responsiveness on the site. That leads to 1.6 times more conversions. So 160% higher sales on the website, essentially. And then on mobile, even better, 197% more sales. And at the same time, they saved 4,000 hours of development time in building that system. And so they reduced cost while increasing revenue, which is like sort of discontinuous. And that's why we call this a bit of a software revolution. It's sort of like we can achieve nonlinear results with the reactive approach. So, and the way they got into that was they came to the Reactive Summit and they did the very similar kind of methodology to this ATI of what we're talking about here. They evaluated a reactive technology, they evaluated an approach, and then they proceeded forward and said, okay, we're going to give this a shot. And all the benefits, flowed from that. They were able to experiment with different things with their customers much more quickly. They got agility in their model, and they're still working on it. But the results so far have been unbelievable. And so accessing results like this, you have to have a starting point. You have to understand how you get into that world and how you start to access that value. And the ATI and the final implementation guidance that you get here, as well as the whole process, is going to give you some really good pointers. Even if you decide to go in a completely different direction after the fact, jumping into this, it's a really easy starting point, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm just looking at the notes from the Verizon case study. Also 40% less effort to build, and they said 50% less TCO. So these are exactly the, and Verizon's obviously a very large organization, lots of resources internally. They made a bet, and at a much bigger, grander level, followed a reactive ATI type of process right to get there. So, but that's also the type of inspiration that we're using to build this offering, where some of these metrics that we're going to be capturing on the business value side for the implementation is that type of ammunition you can use to go back internally and get that sponsorship, because it really, beyond the technology, this is where the true value lies. So hopefully, we've got so many people excited about this, and you're all wondering, how much would this cost, and how do I get engaged? How do I get YoppWorks engaged? So, I'm back. Just to give you a sense of the pricing. So the Reactive ATI, as I said at the beginning, is this is a repeatable service offering for us. So it's something we've productized. We are trying to be as cost effective as possible, because we really believe in the value here to engage with customers, get them to adopt reactive, and continue staying as part of that journey with that particular customer. So the price point for this offering is $27,000 US. Included in that price is everything I've described in the presentation, including the assessment that would be done on site, up to 1 week of workshops, using the maturity model, using the various Reactive Manifesto components we talked about, being able to get all of that data from you. And then continuing with an on-site training, excuse me, of reactive architecture, which includes up to 5 staff with 5 of the customer's employees to attend the training course on site. So the number 5, we believe, is the right number, because most likely we're going to get sponsored by Reactive ATI with 1 or 2 people in the organization. Hopefully through the assessment phase, this creates buzz and interest, both with technical people and with business folks alike. And we feel that 5 is the right number to get really a small nucleus of good interest and good understanding of reactive. And then it also includes the preparation and the presentation of the implementation report, which we will take up to 1 week of preparation time. Travel and living costs are all included in this price of the YoppWorks folks flying down on site and being able to deliver a service that we're talking about. So hopefully you feel that this is very cost effective. We're trying to minimize our costs as much as possible, and really interested in doing several of these engagements with our customers. Just wrapping up the webinar, but we're going to leave a couple minutes here for questions. But before I do, hopefully you're interested in learning more, and if you are, as a next step, if we could suggest maybe scheduling a call with the sales director at YoppWorks. His name is Adam Peck. He's a very friendly individual that would love to chat with anybody who's looking to learn more about Reactive ATI. And then from there, we could provide a series of if you're interested, even before you engage, we can give you examples of the type of reports that we would produce, and the type of more details on how the engagement would work, dates, availability, things of that nature. So really encourage you, if you're interested, to please reach out to Adam, and there's his email address, adam.peck@yoppworks.com. So I think we're coming up a little earlier than we expected, but definitely some time for some questions. I've got a couple questions I think that have come in through some different mediums here that some of the folks have been passing this over to me. And then we're going to keep an eye out on, if you've got a question in the Q&A tab, I think, of the webinar, there's a way for you, or in the Zoom webinar chat, for you to post a question. But we are receiving emails also, or questions by emails, as we did the webinar. So one of the questions that came in, and Mike, maybe this is better suited for you, in terms of reactive. So I think maybe reactive is used not just by Lightbend and YoppWorks in the market. So there's some competition out there, other companies that are saying that they have a reactive framework. So what makes reactive from Lightbend different, and specifically around, I guess, the Reactive Manifesto, and what are things that you should be aware of from these other offerings that they claim that they're also reactive?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm happy to happy to answer that. And we get this question a lot. It's the reactive sort of terminology, and the manifesto was something that Lightbend really pioneered a few years back, and it's really gratifying to see the market adoption for it. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was an unknown term. It didn't really exist, and it was a way for us to say, what is it that we're really doing here, and how can we express this in a way that helps people to understand the benefits and the value of the solution that we're offering to the market. But even wider than that, we were looking at the new world, and we were looking at a world where we have massive consolidation of workloads into the cloud, that we were having as I say, a lot of streaming data coming through in order to create value, instead of having most of our data sort of sitting at rest, and needing to be able to serve massive quantities of people and users and systems. And so we coined reactive at that time and created the Reactive Manifesto. And we said, this is something we should release to the industry. This is something that we should say to the world, come join on, sign up to the Reactive Manifesto, look at its tenets, and let's build an ecosystem together around how people can build applications around this. And so what we're seeing now is, everybody's calling themselves reactive. So, it seems like every enterprise software development framework out there has some sort of version of quote unquote reactive. And one of the challenges with that is that there's people who are have strong implementations, and there's folks who are sort of more jumping on the bandwagon. And so really looking at it with the tenets of the manifesto is really critical when you look at these solutions. So a reactive solution has to be message driven, and that's the core of it. That's how it ensures that you can build a system that is elastic, that is resilient, and is responsive. And so the message driven aspect of it, the reason that's important is that it creates the ability to build systems that don't have any kind of blocking or tight integration between various different components. And so if you're making a method call or a REST call, or there's all kinds of things that are different ways to communicate between systems, ensuring that that system is not relying between its components on the delivery of a message or on the resolution of a call, and that you can truly build a system that is fully asynchronous, and that each component of the system is isolated in a way that it can operate independently. Without that sort of an architectural outline and a way of operating through the system, from data all the way up to presentation, if you don't have that, you can't really fulfill all the tenets of the Reactive Manifesto, and you're not going to get all those benefits. And so evaluating it on that basis is really important. And going through the Reactive ATI is a really good way to sort of understand deeply how that works. And so the Reactive Architecture course, for example, jumps into a lot of these kinds of distributed systems design and methodology things that will help you to evaluate how those solutions are going to impact your environment and how you're going to get the benefits of something like the Reactive Manifesto.
Thanks, Mike. I think we have time for one more question here. So this is a two-part question that came in, and actually I've had this asked to me a few times outside of this webinar. But what's the total time spent by the customer through the ATI process, and what, if any, dependencies are there for the customer? So it's a good question. One of the things that was really important for us in designing Reactive ATI is we tried to be as efficient as possible, realize that customers are busy. There's lots of internal priorities, and so if we're doing an assessment and a training, we want to make sure that the impact is as minimal as possible, and that we're getting the best, the most effective engagement with you. So again, the assessment can be up to a week, but we think we would be on site for a week. We wouldn't necessarily be involved in a 9-to-5 workshop with you every day. We would tailor it around your particular schedule and when the stakeholders are available. So maybe on one day it's a morning, the next day it's an afternoon. Really meant to try to accommodate as much as possible, but we do need some time to be able to do those workshops, go through the maturity models, ask a lot of the questions that are related to how you're currently working, your current architecture, the current development process. In terms of dependencies, there really are no technical dependencies. So no part of the assessment involves any kind of loading of software agents on some of your infrastructure, excuse me, or doing any kind of disruption to any environments that you may have deployed. We may look to sample some code, but really there's no security, networking, or any kind of intrusive type of deployments of any technology that we would use part of our assessment process, nor would we through the training. The training is really self-contained. I think we'd want you to show up with some laptops. There's some more details we can provide on that. But really, it's a matter of just getting that time with you and be able to ask those very important questions. So hopefully that answers that question. I think if there's any other questions at this point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank all of our participants. Thank you very much. I know your time is valuable and that you've got lots of priorities, so really appreciate you joining this. We have recorded the webinar, and we will make it available. So if you've got colleagues within your organization that you think would benefit from watching Mike and I describe the Reactive ATI, we will be sending a follow-up link from the marketing team. So from our manager, Tiffany, you'll probably get a link. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank Mike, who's very busy himself and has taken the time to join us here. really appreciate your support, Mike, in being able to talk about this today. So with that, Mike, I don't know if you have any final comments.
No, this is great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.